We will from today we will be discussing about the general features of electrical machines, which you all know are widely used for energy conversion, electrical to mechanical and mechanical to electrical. But all machines have certain general features, and first we have to look at the general features of all machines, and then we will try to see the special features of different machines. Because if you know the general features, then you will understand its basic working principles, construction methodologies and so on. So this is today's topic will be on looking at the general features of different electrical machines. And you are aware that these are the scientists who have contributed to the working of this subject, like Gilbert in the 16th century, Coulomb 1736 to 1806, then we have Ampere 1775 to 1836, then Oersted 1777 to 51, and Gauss 1777 to 1855, Faraday 1791 to 1867, Henry 1779 to 1878, then Lenz 1804 to 1863, Weber 1804 to 1891, Maxwell 1831 to 1879, then Fleming 1849 to 1945, and Lorentz 1852 to 1928, and finally Tesla, who has contributed a lot for development of electrical machines and more so induction machines, in 1856 to 1943. Now these are the scientists on whom you are fairly aware of, and the development of motors over a period are as follows. 1831, Faraday discovery of electromagnetic induction, okay, and then 1838 the DC motors or direct current motors were developed, and this was the contribution of electric boat propulsion by Jacobi. 1840 is electric car propulsion by Davidson. Then we find 1873 industrial electrical machines exhibited in Vienna, including a pump drive. Then 1879 is electric train propulsion by Siemens. These are developments. 1897 is the very important invention called a Ward-Leonard control of DC motors. A low loss system was developed in 1897, and then in 1930 the mercury arc rectifiers were employed for variable speed operation. 1955 the invention of the so called magnetic amplifiers. So this was the development in 1955 which was used for controlling the speed of motors. 1960 came a major invention called a controlled semiconductor or a thyristor or a silicon control rectifier, which was invented by GE, and that gave a impetus to the development of variable speed drives. Then subsequently this is all about the control of DC motors. So whatever we have seen. Then about the AC motors, these are the developments. That means 1884 Siemens developed the so called AC commutator motors, which you generally use it in your mixers. Then 1885, that was a period when Tesla and Ferraris developed the AC induction motor. Then 1887 we had the AC commutator motor by Wilson. Of course, these motors are now not in use because further better developments have come. Now, the 1889, it was Dobrowski who developed what is known as squirrel cage. A squirrel cage induction motor development was by Dobrowski. 1891 was again a variable frequency drive. You change the frequency of supply to a motor, you can control the speed. That was starting from 1891. 1895 was multi-speed induction motor development. 1905 is the so-called slip ring induction motor control, what we know as a Kramer control and a Scherbius control, where you can control the speed of a motor by controlling the power fed to the rotor. Then of course 1910 is Schrage and Richter had the so-called AC commutator motors, and these are again now obsolete because of the new developments. 1933 was again AC commutator motor by Schwartz. Again these are not much in use today except in very old systems which are installed. And the 1942 is a variable frequency drive by Schwartz on single rotating machine. And 1958 was a major development by Rockcliffe of University of Bristol in England, who developed what is a pole amplitude modulated two-speed motors. So you could control you could change the speed numbers of induction motors to change speeds. So that was a major development started in 1958. 1963 was again a development of variable frequency drive. Nowadays this has become a front runner in variable speed drives, where you control the frequency using the semiconductor or power electronic converters. And 1970 was so-called slip ring motor cascade. That means the induction motor slip ring control is possible through semiconductors converters. And then 1974 was the development of switched reluctance motors by Lawrenson of University of Leeds. So these are the chronological developments of motor drives, which again is an important part of the subject. Now again a review of what you are likely to know is coming to the parts of a motor. Okay. So all motors, all electrical machines will have all these parts. One is it will have a stator and a rotor, that is a stationary part and a rotating part. Okay. Then we have an air gap, which is the space between the stator and rotor surface. It is basically a stator inner surface and rotor outer surface. Okay. So that is the air gap. Now the frame is the outer structure holding the stator and fixed to the base. So this is the what we call it as a frame, which is the definition. Then we have a shaft, which is just like frame is an outer part of the stator and shaft is inner part of the rotor. That is, inner part of rotor connected to the external mechanical elements. Why is the shaft used? Shaft is used to transmit or receive mechanical power. So this is the purpose of a shaft. Just like frame holds the stator, shaft holds the rotor. Okay, and also it is used in. Then we have this definition of terminal. Now terminal is is a part fixed to the stator frame generally with electrical terminal points connected to internal electrical part. That means internal parts are there, so they are brought out to the terminals to transmit or receive electrical power. Now this is the purpose of the terminal. So it transmits electrical power or receives electrical power, whereas the shaft transmits mechanical power or receives mechanical power. Okay. Now there is also a bearing, which is an important component. It is a part which holds the shaft at both ends, because for smooth running the bearings are there just on which the rotor is mounted. So if you would like to now see it pictorially, so this is how the a part of the machine looks like. So we have the frame which is outside here, that is the outside part is frame. To the frame is fixed the stator. This is the stator you see here. Okay. So this is the side view and this is the cut view at the end view, can I say. Now after the stator you come down, you get the air gap. This is the air gap, that is the gap between the stator and the rotor. So you have the rotor here. So you have the stator, rotor and the air gap, and you see rotor is mounted on this shaft. This is the shaft, okay, and then the frame, and this is the base plate on which all the machines are fixed, and of course you bring out the terminals at the end or something. Now these are the diameters of the machine. So you have the shaft diameter is D, then you have the rotor outside diameter, stator inside diameter and stator outside diameter. Now you will see that the air gap length will be the difference between the stator inside diameter and rotor outside diameter divided by 2. Okay. So you have the a picture and the dimensions. So you will notice that the major dimensions of any machine would be the diameter of the machine and the length of the machine. So that fixes, because every machine is not operating in isolation, they are fixed to do a job, right. If it is a generator, it has to be coupled to an external prime mover. If it is a motor, it has to be coupled to an external load. So but in a large system, it must be it must have a size which suits to that necessary application. Now the next important part we must understand is all machines work mainly with electromagnetic fields. So we should know what is this so called electromagnetic interaction, right. This is the important part we should know. So if you have an electromagnetic interaction, the machine must have a magnetic part and an electric part, okay. So there must be parts which should carry the flux, there must be parts which should carry the currents. So all machines will have this. So there will be a magnetic part which is broadly mainly the core which carry the flux. So you will notice important thing is the core is the one which carries the flux. And what is it made up of? They are made up typically of ferromagnetic materials. It must have good properties. What property you expect? It must have a high permeability, it must have low loss, okay. So we use ferromagnetic materials. They are typically iron alloyed with some other materials like silicon, silicon steel. So these are the high quality alloys actually. So they are used, and they are often they are laminated. So a core is not generally a solid structure. The core is made up of laminations, stamped or stampings which are stacked together to form the structure which you call it as a core. So we have noticed that the material, it is made up as ferromagnetic material and it's laminated, and the magnetic part may also often consist of a permanent magnet in some machines, right. In some machines the magnetic path will also consist of permanent magnets, okay. So this is the magnetic part of a machine, okay. Now as far as coming to the electric part of a machine would be the winding. This is the main portion, that is it will have the winding. Just like the magnetic part of the core carries the flux, electric part of the winding carries the current, okay. Now what is this winding and what is it made up of? So first thing we know is winding carry the current, okay. And what is it made up of? It is made up of typically copper or aluminum. So this is in all machines, okay. Now what is winding? Is a cluster of copper or conductors. Now it is first is we define what is a turn. A turn is just one loop of wire which has two conductors. So, two conductors means one goes in, the current goes in, and other side current comes out. So, you have a turn. Okay. So, we will typically say this is a turn, right. This is one turn. Is it clear? So, this is the current goes in, maybe goes in like this, and current comes out. So, we start with one turn, which is a copper turn. Okay. Then next what you do is you make coil out of these turns, right. So, how do you make coil out of these turns? So, a coil has several turns. So, you will see a coil has several turns. So, you make several turns of a coil. So, you have one turn, okay, then you have two turns, like that. So, you have several turns. So, you can have n turns, and that means current goes in, current comes out, but it traverses n times inside the coil. Is it clear? So, you have a n turn coil. This is called a coil of n turns. So, you have a coil of n turns. So, we have seen a turn and a coil. Then what is a winding? So, winding will have several coils. A cluster of coils, displaced in different ways. So, I have maybe one coil, I may have another coil, like this. So, you may have a cluster of coils which is distributed or placed. So, you will have one current going in, it goes through one n turn, it goes to next coil, another n turns. So, it comes out like this. So, you will see this may be a winding, is family of coils as per the design. So, you will have this type of coils. Okay. Now, if you want to see some picture I have, for example, this is what you hear is a stamping. I mean, there are several stampings on which the cores are made. So, there will be stator stamping, rotor stampings and so on. These are all different shapes of stampings in which the cores are made, and I will subsequently show you the different types of coils when we get to the picture just of the, okay, we'll come back, okay, just here, right. So, this is you will see here, okay, right. So, this is the coils, you will see this is a coil of different turns, right, and while these are thinner wires with several turns, and these coils are thicker conductors. So, there are smaller number of turns in each coil. Here there are more turns in each coil. Okay. Now, you can either have a thicker conductors with smaller turns or thinner conductors with larger turns. The ampere turns will continue to be almost the same. So, you will notice that the current that is carried would depend upon the size of the conductor that you are using. Okay. Now, we come back to the next part, that coils we have understood in the winding made up of coils, made up of turns, right. Now, the coils have different shapes. So, you can have different shapes of coils. You can have circular coils, you can have square coils, or you can have rectangular coils, or you can have diamond shaped coils. So, there are different shapes of coils that you may have. Okay. So, just we can show it here. You can have a coil which is circular, which can be placed on a core, or you can have a square coil, that means current going in and coming out, okay. And then you can have a rectangular coil or a diamond shaped coil, okay. But there are some parts of this coil that you see here. Only certain portion of that coil is inside the core, which is called an active part, right. You place it in a core, that is called an active part of a coil. There are certain portions which is outside in the air, these are called end or overhang part. This is the overhang part. You see, this is the active part here and overhang part here. Now the space between, this is one conductor going in out. So this is one coil side, is another coil side. The space between, the distance between the coil side is called a coil span. So this is one of the definitions you should know. This is a span or a coil pitch or a coil span, okay. And so each coil has two sides called, these are called coil sides. So each coil has two coil sides and the space between the coil side is called the coil span. So we have this definitions. Other terminologies that we use are, what is a coil side? A side of a coil, okay. One side goes to one slot generally, other side goes to another slot, okay. And then coil span or a coil pitch is the distance between the coil sides. This is another definition, the distance between the two coil sides. And we also have another definition called a concentrated coil or a distributed coil. It can be a full coil, or a winding coils can be distributed, or all coils can be concentrated and put in one place. There is another term, concentric coils. That means there are several cluster of coils whose center is same. They are concentric coils, okay. We will show it now. What are these meant by, okay. For example, this one, this is a concentrated winding. That means on a core all the coils are placed together. Is it clear? So this is called, just like in a DC machine, we just put them together, a lumped or concentrated winding, okay. Or you can put them in different slots and it is called a distributed winding. So they are in different slots. So there is this is a coil side of one winding, and in this distributed winding, so you see they are in slots. So between two slots the space is called tooth. So you have a slot here and you have a tooth here, right, and it is uniformly cut on the surface of the core, okay. So we have coil side of the winding and they each one with a tooth and a slot, and this is concentrated winding, this is distributed winding, okay. Now we also found out what is meant by the concentric. This is concentric. So I have three coils here. You see here, this is the core on which three coils are put in these 6 slots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are the slots. Now this is the slot and this is the tooth, okay, or this is the tooth. How many coils I have? We have 3 coils. There is coil 1 here, coil 2 here, coil 3 here. Now coil 1 has a small span, let us say S1. Coil 2 has a span or pitch S2. Coil 3 has a largest span or S3. Now you will say, but their center is same. They are called the concentric windings. The center of the coil is same, okay. So they are as concentric. But you can see the same thing here. But effect is same. The current goes in first through coil 1, then jumps to coil 2, then jumps to coil 3 and comes out, okay. So we have 3 coils, 6 coil sides located in 6 slots, but magnetic effect is same as this. But you can achieve the same thing by 3 identical coils. Here the 3 coils are not identical. they don't have the same size. Here 3 are diamond shaped coils of the same geometric configuration. That means you start with coil 1 here. So coil 1 is in these slots, let us say. So 1 to, let us say 4, 1 to 5 is, I think it has been wrongly numbered. So if this is 1, this is 2 and this is 3, and so it goes in like this. So after one coil it jumps to the second coil. So we will say this is coil 1, this is this is coil 2, and this is coil 3. Okay. So let's concentrate on this. So coil 1, coil 2, coil 3. So goes in, so current goes in, let us say I, goes through coil 1, jumps to coil 2, and goes through coil 2, and then jumps through coil 3, and then comes out. So this will be the let us say the plus point of the coil and minus point of the coil, or if you say A dash or something. Okay. So we can represent this by a coil like this. So that is A dash. So it goes through several turns. Supposing each coil has 10 turns, this winding will have 30 turns total, because we have 3 coils per winding, and each coil may have several turns. Okay. So you must now understand what is the difference between the concentric as well as the distributed coils. Okay. So we have now seen magnetic part, electric part, the windings, the different configuration windings, and which are how they are generally located. Okay. Now the other important point that we have to generally understand in electrical machines is most of the machines generally work as a motor or a generator. This again is a simple definition. So we have next come to motoring and generating definitions. Okay. A motoring is one where energy is converted from electrical to mechanical. Okay. See, electrical to mechanical is called the motoring, and generating is mechanical to electrical is called generating. So this is a simple definition. Now in actual practice, these are the two systems that you will have. Now if this is motoring, so if you have a motor, electrical energy is fed to the motor and mechanical energy is taken out of the motor, but there will be certain losses, there will be energy loss will be there, which again goes out of the motor. Okay. So electrical energy input would be equal to mechanical energy output plus the losses. Okay. Now if you look at the generator, you are putting in mechanical energy and taking out electrical energy. So the direction of energy flow will change from electrical to mechanical between the generator and the motor, but the direction of loss remains the same. See, loss is always going out, no loss is coming into the machine. Okay. So you must understand the loss is always unidirectional, which just goes out of the machine. This is the simple logic. Okay. Now we can take an example of a wind electric generator, for example. So this is a wind electric generator. Now typically the wind is blowing and there is a turbine, and which is being rotated by the wind, and generally there will be a gearbox because the turbines are generally low speed. Typically wind generators today built are a maximum of 1 megawatt. Okay. And down from maybe 10 kilowatt to 1 megawatt. So this will be you step up the speed by a gearbox and then it drives a generator. Okay. Now this generator, So from mechanical energy from the source goes to convert it into electrical energy and goes to an electrical load. Okay. So you have this type of energy flow going out. Now a reverse case we can see. Reverse case is a fan. You have an electrical supply, whereas here you had an electrical load. That means the power was taken out, electrical power was taken out. Now you are giving out electrical power from the supply and drives a motor, and this motor through a gearbox will be driving a fan. So the wind is coming out. So wind is coming out. So the energy flow is in the other direction. So this is a simple example of motoring and generating, how the energy flow reverses. And typically the speed would be same direction and torque would be opposite in mechanical, and in electrical same voltage will be same direction, current would be opposite. So you will notice that it is the torque of the shaft which will change, or current of the windings would change. Okay. So this we have now seen some of the general features which are we encounter in most of the machines. Okay. Now you may be aware that we will be dealing mainly with conventional machines because they are vastly used in industry today. Now what are these conventional machines? So conventional machines broadly are classified into two varieties, two types. One is called the DC machine and another is called an AC machine. So we have a conventional machine DC. We call DC machine because it operates with DC supply. DC machines operate with DC supply in general, and the power that is generated is DC and power that is taken out is from a DC source. Okay. Similarly, a AC machine we call because it is operated from a AC supply. So DC machine and AC machine. Okay. And AC machine broadly we have two types. One is called a synchronous machine and other is called induction machine. So these are the two machines which are generally used. Okay. This is one is synchronous, another induction. So we will be studying in the subsequent lectures the working principles and other aspects of DC machines and AC machines, and now we have to see what will be the difference between the two. Now while we are studying this, that there are certain differences between these machines based on, I call it access points, because you have to access a machine. Okay. Now how do you access the machine? Okay. Because what are the access points? Because why do you want an access? Because you want to input some energy to the machine, or you want to take out some energy from the machine. So there is energy input or energy output. So where do you put energy, and from where you take out energy? That is what is called access points. Okay. Now there is the one access point is the shaft, right? So shaft is the one which is also called a mechanical port. We can call the shaft as a mechanical port from where you have the you take out mechanical energy or input mechanical energy. So what do you apply? You apply a torque, right? You generally apply a torque to the shaft, and what happens when you apply a torque? It will start moving, it will start rotation. So the torque is an independent variable, whereas the speed is a dependent variable or a displacement. So you obtain the speed or you obtain rotation, right? This is what you do, is from the shaft. Okay. And therefore the power is defined typically as the product of torque into speed. The power, mechanical power in a shaft at any instant is the product of torque into speed, and it will have a unit of watt. Okay. So this is as far as the mechanical part is concerned, and then electrical part you feed it through the terminals or take out through the terminals. So that you can call it electrical port. In generally there will be only one shaft, but there is possibility of several ports, electrical ports, because there will be several terminal pairs from where you can take out energy or through which you can feed energy. So normally what you do, you apply a voltage there. Just like to the shaft you apply a torque, here you are applying a voltage from a voltage source. So to the shaft you have an external torque source which will apply the torque, and here you apply a voltage, and then when you apply a voltage, what happens in the windings, you start drawing a current. If you apply a voltage from the source, you obtain a current. Now again the power there will be at any instant is given by whatever voltage you applied and whatever the current that you have. So instantaneous power P you can say is voltage at that instant into current at that instant. Okay. So this is what we have access points to this. Now this is okay, you are accessing the shaft is easy, you can couple with some other external mechanical element, but how do you access the windings of the rotor? The rotor has windings, how do you access them? So that is the important aspect you should see. So we have two ways to access the rotor. One method we call it as slip ring and brush arrangement, we will see what it is, and the second one is called commutator and brush. There are two ways you access the rotor windings. Okay. The slip ring and brush, we do not expect any change in frequency, that is one thing, no change in frequency, no change in the magnitude and so on, whereas if you have commutator and brush, the frequency will change. So this is the difference that you find between the two methods of accessing the rotor, slip ring brush and commutator and brush. Now let us look at this. So this is the slip ring arrangement. So these are the slip rings which are basically a good conducting rings fitted to the shaft, they rotate, and then there are the brushes which are touching the slip rings. Now you will notice that from the brush you have the access points XY. Supposing I pass a current I here, it will pass through slip rings S1, it will pass through slip ring S1 and then goes into the coil inside I and comes out through the other conductor or coil side and comes out through the other slip ring which is connected here. So one coil side or one winding end terminal of a winding is connected to two slip rings. So you will see there is no change, whatever current flowing here will be here. If it is DC it will be DC, if it is AC this will be AC, right? And whatever voltage you apply here, supposing you apply 100 volts here, that 100 volts will come across these slip rings and that 100 volts will be across the winding. Okay, no change. So this is called, these are the slip rings, this is the shaft and these are the brushes. On the other hand, let us look at the commutator. The commutator segments have this arrangement. One is the same coil which is going inside, but that is connected to two segments, let us say call it as A segment and B segment. Okay. Then this commutator segment we will call it as C1 and C2. So C1 is connected to A and C2 is connected to B. Let us say AB is the coil sides. AB is the coil sides, is what it is. So this is the A coil side and B coil sides. A is connected to C1 permanently and B is connected to C2 permanently. Okay, but it rotates, the coil rotates, so commutators rotate. Okay, and commutator is fixed to the shaft. It is tightly fixed to the shaft. So what are things which are rotating? Core is rotating, coil is rotating, coil side is rotating, commutator is rotating, shaft is rotating. But what is not rotating? What is not rotating is the brush. Okay? So brush is stationary. So we have brush which is stationary. But commutator segments are rotating. So what you notice here is, as it rotates, at this instant, for example, the brush B1 is in with C1 and B2 is with C2. But after some time you will notice that B1 comes into contact with C2 and B2 comes into contact with C1. Okay? So you will find some alternating situation. So the potential of B1 will sometime be that of C1 and sometime be that of C2. Similarly, potential of brush B2 will sometimes be that of C1 and other time be that of C2. Okay? So even if the windings are alternating, you will notice that this potential will be same, right? So you might have a situation that the coil potential, let us say voltage across AB, it may be like this, okay, of some fixed value. Now across the brush, this is the coil. Across the brush, what will it be? Across the brush it will be same V, because the same thing will get reversed. So you will have at some time the B1, the brush B1 will be with A, after some brush B1 will be with B. Okay? So this is almost, you can say, is a mechanical rectifier. Okay? Now the three machines that we talked about, which is now made up of a combination of these parts. Okay? So you have a DC machine whose stator is a field, which can be permanent magnet or it can be wound. So DC machine will have a field structure that will have the permanent magnet or it's a wound, and this winding generally will have series winding or a shunt winding or a compound winding. Okay? This will be the combination of types of windings that you always see in a DC machine. And how about rotor? Rotor is the armature. Armature is a distributed winding. It is not a concentrated winding. The field coil is concentrated. The field coil is concentrated, not distributed. This is a concentrated one, not distributed one, whereas the rotor is a distributed in slots. Here there are no slots in the stator, okay, and it's a saliency that is connected to commutator and brush. Armature ends, each coil end is connected to a pair of commutator segments, okay, and then to the brush which comes out. So what is your terminal? So terminal will be the armature terminal is the brush terminal. The armature terminal of DC machine accessing is through the brush, and therefore you have two terminals minimum, and then you have the field terminal, you can take it directly from stator. So if you go to a terminal box, the field terminals are nothing, no brushes are there, so it's connected directly. Now the DC machines in general, from industrial or practical point of view, they are mainly used as motors nowadays. So their DC machine application is mainly for motors, okay, and very limited applications as generators. Okay. So if you want to look at that, how it looks like, you have the armature winding in slots, the field winding like this. Okay. So you have the pole, there is the pole shoe at the end. This is called the frame or the yoke which carries the poles. Then you have the rotor, you have the shaft, you have the field winding, and you have the armature winding. So this is the cross section picture of a DC machine. Okay. So quickly let us look at the synchronous machine. Synchronous machine stator has 3-phase distributed windings. So it's not a concentrated winding. So there's a difference. It is a distributed winding, 3-phase. Okay. And then the rotor is the field winding, unlike a DC machine. DC machine rotor is armature, and here the stator is armature. Okay. And you may know armature is the part which carries the power, or where the voltage is induced, and the field is a part which carries the flux. Okay. So the field produces flux, whereas armature produces power. Okay. And there are two types of field windings. One is called salient pole type, which are normally used in low speed machines with high pole numbers, and other is called a cylindrical rotor. We will see the picture of it little later. Now the DC is fed in the synchronous machine. DC is fed to rotor through slip rings, because you have to feed DC. The field winding will have to carry DC, and it is fed through the slip rings. And of course nowadays they are trying to avoid the slip ring and brush, because they create some problems. Therefore nowadays in small ranges up to about 50-60 kilowatt, what are known brushless generators are made, which uses rotating diodes, etc. Okay. Now the synchronous machines are typically mainly used as generators. So they are not, they are very limited use as motors. They are mainly used as generators. More than 90% of electricity produced in the world is through synchronous generators. So if you want to look at the picture, so you have the armature has 3 windings, A winding, B winding and C winding. So A winding means when a current passes through that, it will produce the flux in the A axis. This is the axis of A winding, and this is the axis of B winding, this is the axis of C winding. So you will notice the B winding lags A winding by 120 degrees, and C winding lags B winding by 120 degrees. So you will have 3 windings, let us say A winding, then B winding and C winding. So it will have its terminals of each winding, A dash, let us say B dash and C dash. So you can connect them in star or delta. So you have 3-phase distributed winding located in slots to create the stator of a synchronous machine. Okay. And the rotor, we said there are 2 types of rotors. We explained little earlier. One is called the salient pole, another is called the cylindrical rotor. Okay. This is the field winding. The salient pole is protruded poles are there. Here there are no protruded poles. So you will notice in cylindrical rotor there are slots cut on both sides through which current goes. So the current will go here. Okay, it comes out, maybe it go to second coil, comes out, third coil, comes out, fourth coil, and it might go out like this. So you will notice, but you will notice that this is not uniformly cut rotor. This is because there should be some portions to produce the poles. So if you pass a current through this, if you pass a cross current, current goes in, current comes out. So it will produce a north pole here and a south pole here. And similarly, if you pass a current through like this, so it will again produce a north pole here and a south pole here. So flux lines will be going out like this. Okay. So this is how a configuration, and these currents are fed through the slip ring and brush arrangement. That is the rotor. Okay. Lastly, let us look at the induction or asynchronous machine. Right. Now you have the stator, same as a synchronous machine. A rotor, there are 2 types. One is called a squirrel cage rotor, another is called a slip ring rotor with brushes, and these are short circuited rotors. That is what difference you find, and these are induction machines are mostly used as motors. So this is how a squirrel cage rotor looks like. So there are these bars, this is the core, and this is the end ring, and this is the shaft. So there are bars are there, a short circuit through the end rings. Okay. So we have seen the different types of machines. In a typical system, you may find a typical power or energy system. you may find you have all natural resources. You can have hydro, coal, oil, nuclear fuel, and you from where you produce a mechanical power, mechanical prime mover, use a synchronous generator, and that synchronous generator produces the power and goes into asynchronous motor or induction motor and drives a mechanical load. So, you will see from source naturally available, you will have a useful work for your application. So, this is a typical energy flow which comprises of one electromechanical devices and other electromechanical devices. So, next class we will take up further on this topic.